one, and go.
Hello, and welcome to the seventh in a series of sessions on the theory of AI. This is about the AI and the architectural office of the future. Last week we looked at some of the leading young practitioners, some of the experimental practitioners working in the field of AI and architecture. And next week we'll be looking at some of the tools being used in the architectural office of the future. We'll be inviting in Wanyu He, who is the leader of the CEO of XCool, a company in Shenzhen, which is one of the leaders in producing AI software for the office of the future. We'll also be welcoming Theodore Galanis, who's been working on some of the interesting performative aspects of AI, looking at how you can model environmental conditions and take AI forward in a different way, not so much focusing on the question of aesthetics, so much as dealing with the performance of the building itself. I should say that this is part of a series that is an initiative that's building up from the Digital Futures, which Philip Yuan and I initiated in 2011. Philip Yuan is here with us today. And the Digital Future series is really premised on the idea of trying to make educational ideas available for everyone for free. We're interested in creating what we call the global classroom and bringing these ideas to people throughout the world. In the summer, we had a very large online event, an online global event called Digital Futures World. And we realized that we had broken through the walls of the classroom and managed to find a platform that could reach out to people throughout the world, regardless of their economic status. We believe firmly that educational ideas should be offered for free. Education should be a privilege and not a right to those with money. And so we're trying to use this platform as a way of disseminating ideas and bringing the world together, reaching out to communities otherwise underprivileged, otherwise overlooked, and bringing some of the latest and most interesting ideas to them. We're also, as part of that initiative, planning on the possibility of creating a platform that is a doctoral platform whereby universities across the world can come together on a single platform and discuss and debate ideas. The idea that we found in the summer that you could use a digital platform not just to reach out to people around the world, but also to essentially to rethink the possibilities of education. The idea that there should be a single professor in a single classroom talking to a single group of individual students seems to be a bit something of the past these days. We can now look at the possibility of some kind of global or collective knowledge. So we've been holding sessions on Saturdays on Digital Futures, which have been operating, to my mind, a bit like a global brain. What's interesting about this is having a group of experts together in one single panel allows you to sort of debate and think through things in a much faster way than otherwise would happen. The intensity of these sessions is something quite extraordinary. So we're trying to explore this and using this platform as a kind of prototype this particular semester for exploring how we can offer a kind of global platform, a global classroom. And this is just one of a series of events that are going to be a series of sessions that are going to be looking at the aspects in which the AI is going to change the office of architecture in the future. One thing I have to say that unfortunately I got an email this morning from Tom Main, very, very late, saying that he unfortunately wasn't able to come today. But no worries. First of all, Daniel Bolojan will be stepping in to give some technical explanation of the Deep Himmelblau project that has fascinated all of us. And I'm just, to make up for Tom himself, I'm showing some work that was generated by some of my students, informed by morphosis, using data from morphosis, using GANs, generative adversarial networks, to hallucinate morphosis buildings. Today we have as our main guest, Wolf Prix, someone that I owe a great debt of gratitude to. I, as a student in the 1980s in the United Kingdom, the University of Cambridge, I have to say that I was a little bit disappointed by the architectural scene. I had been fired up by ideas from Bertolt Lubetkin's Penguin Pool to Jorn Utsen's Sydney Opera House, and I was expecting architecture to be a dynamic, exciting discipline to study. What I found instead was what we could know as postmodernism, what Charles Jenks has referred to postmodernism. To my mind, the single greatest crisis that ever happened into architectural education. What happened to that forward-looking, dynamic, inspirational sort of discipline that I was brought up with? What happened to all those Russian constructivists? What happened to all the kind of spirit of change, the charged atmosphere, the passion of much of the early work? It had all disappeared. So by the end of the 1980s, I was relieved to suddenly find out there was a body of an increasingly large body of work that came out under the heading of deconstructivism, deconstruction, and so on, that suddenly saw the possibility of reigniting architecture with a fresh set of ideas. They should say this is the work of my FIU student, Nicolas, where he's on the left-hand side. You can see a sketch which on the right-hand side has been interpreted based on a neural network that has been trained on images of morphosis to generate possible other forms of morphosis buildings. So architecture was in crisis, but suddenly there was this burst of energy, an energy that was kind of changing the whole world. My students back in the 90s, I was showing them images of flaming wings and reading out your manifesto about making architecture come alive, and not necessarily burning architecture, but injecting a certain passion into architecture, the passion that was decidedly missing in the 80s. So I would read out your manifesto about no more Biedermeier facades and all that thing. I don't know when you wrote that thing, whether you realized that somewhere in the University of Nottingham, the University world, wherever, people would be referring to this, but to my mind, this was a manifesto of a new generation, a new way of thinking that really just saved architecture from its maybe darkest moment, most nostalgic moment. In the summer, Wolf and Tom had a discussion, a panel discussion, where they were presenting their respective ideas about AI, and Wolf was to call the session "From Decon to AI," and I think that's a really important slogan to have for the kind of these two key moments. I see AI, and Matthias Del Campo and I, who's also from Vienna, we are editing an AD on AI and architecture. And Matthias's view is that really this is the first genuinely 21st century technique that is influencing architecture. It's having a revolution in some of the most progressive schools around the world. It's causing a revolution in some of the most progressive schools around the world. So I firmly believe that that AI is going to do much to architecture, which has been lost in some ways in a kind of almost another form of postmodernism, could then reignite it with another form of architectural passion. So I would like to. I don't want to say anything to introduce by way of introduction to Wolf. Wolf requires no introduction, I think. But what I will say is that I was in the summer. I was part of summer, actually the year before last. I was on a jury for for a competition in Shanghai in China, and Wolf was there, and it was an interesting situation. Matthias Del Campo and I were both on the judging panel, and Wolf came in, and he was wearing his pair of sunglasses and looking, maybe he probably jet lagged, but he looked so dynamic and so full of enthusiasm. There was a question that came in from the audience. Well, how are you going to pay for this? And the response was something I think typically Wolf. He said, "Well, if you decide to select this building, you will need a new airport in this town." And I don't know whether Shanghai planned to build a new airport or not, but he won the competition, which is a fantastic thing. And one thing I will say about both Wolf and Tom, which I think is really important to me, is they remain committed to education. Tom, of course, was founder of SciArc, and has since been since giving up his post at UCLA, where he's a distinguished professor, he went on to go back to SciArc to teach there. And Wolf had a fundamental impact on not just Vienna, but Austria, in fact, the world as a whole, by effectively setting up Angewandte as the kind of prestigious school where many of his friends came and taught. So Zaha was teaching there, Greg Lynn was teaching there, Sanford Quinter, and so on and so on and so on. It became a real hub for intellectual and creative impulses. And that I think is important because we are now, those of us here who are educators, are dealing with a very new terrain, unstable ground, as Wolf calls it, whereby the old structures are giving weight and new structures are coming into place, and it's not quite clear where we're going. I should say this is a work of also another FIU student of mine, Florida International University student, Christopher Charnes, where he's again looking at the work of morphosis and working through it through GANs, hallucinating other possible morphosis buildings. And it seems to me vitally important, especially in the age of AI, architecture in the age of AI, the title of the book that I've just finished, to really think about what impact AI is going to have on our profession, because it is going to have a profound impact. It's going to lead to a reduction in size of offices. In a discussion with Tom Main last week, he was saying, well, maybe that's a good thing. I would prefer to have just 12 people talking to in my office rather than 80 or so, because then I can really get to know them and talk this way. But it is going to have a huge impact. And I think as educators, we have a responsibility to really think through what will happen in our discipline in a few years' time. Things are going to change, and we should be prescient enough to be able to warn our students and inform our students of the new ways of thinking. To my mind, what is so stunning about both Wolf and Tom is that the way they're kind of open to these new ideas in the way they were back in the 1980s, 1990s, but so too later on in their career these days, where even though they're well established, they're open to the possibility of engaging with these new technologies, of exploring what they might lead to. So it's a great pleasure for me to be able to welcome Wolf. He's, as I say, one of the three people that I found most inspiring in my career, and alongside Tom himself, and I would say Zaha, who's sadly no longer with us, but he's really injected something not only into the the Viennese architecture, excuse me, the Viennese architectural scene, but the whole of the Austrian scene. I now see that Innsbruck has also taken off as a very dynamic school, and indeed the whole world. He had an office in Los Angeles for a while. He studied at SARC himself, and the influence of Wolf has been astonishing. And I'm really glad to see that he's now working on projects in China, and those of you following in China will get to see one of the most inspirational architects around. So unfortunately, Tom is not able to be with us today, but what we will be doing is I'll be inviting Daniel Bolajan, who has been responsible for the technical aspects of this extraordinary office in venture into AI, Deep Himmelblau, to say something after Wolf. So I'd like to welcome Wolf and thank him for his generosity and his time. I wanted to know, Wolf, this has been broadcast around the world, and there are many people. Like yesterday, I was talking to some students in Egypt on Clubhouse, and they were just saying how excited they were to be able to access these ideas that otherwise they would not have been able to access. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and pass this over to Wolf.
I hope I can find the screen sharing thing.
Yeah, it's a green button at the bottom.
Yeah, I just got it. So, what else should I do? I'm lost.
You go onto screen share, and then it should be.
I got it.
Okay.
Teilen, but I don't know which one.
If you click on the main green button, I can
talk about my calendar. I can talk about my mails. Wait a minute.
You have your PowerPoint on your screen, right?
Yeah. Here we are.
Okay, great. So all you need to do now is to make that full screen. So the bottom is that's great.
I got it.
Fantastic.
Sooner or later, I will learn it. First, I have to say, without Daniel, we never would have got so far like we are right now. This is a major thing for me, but while I'm collecting all these things together, and I did a lecture about decon and IA, I found out that we always, since 68, when we founded Himmelblau, we always went for coincidences and mistakes in the method of thinking architecture. Because the driving point was, we always said, if you only think in architectural terms, only architecture will come out, and nothing more is boring than architecture. We said 1968. So while working on to translate drawings into models and models into reality, and sketching with a lighter, yeah, which turns out it was the first idea of displacing wing. Working with materials we can bend and with the lighter as well. PVC foil, we created new shapes we called form mutations. This is one thing. The other thing is we started to think about how can we change architecture radically? And we found out that we have to find the weakest point in the process of developing projects. And we found out, or we think this is the moment of designing. And by shorten this moment and excluding all the constraints which prohibits to liberate the space we are thinking of, we think this is the way we can we can find new shapes and forms in our architectural language. And we experimented a lot, and this key project was the so-called open house, where I made the sketch with eyes closed, using my hand and my brain as a seismograph of the feelings you will have when you step into the space we are designing. So this is a short background of our way. And when I looked at the Deep Himmelblau movies, I thought, okay, this is almost that what we always wanted to do. I personally had no idea how I can do it, and thanks God we had Daniel in our office who started to work on it with two of our Viennese guys now, and we are still developing the whole thing. So we have three, let's say three co-workers. AI1, this is the co-worker who is concerned with shapes and gestalt, forms. A2 will be the guy who is learning our ground plans, our sections, and the co-worker AI3 is the co-worker who is responsible for BIM, Building Information Modeling. Because my thinking is, and the schools have to experiment on this thing as well, my thinking is, when we will get in 10 years commission to do, let's say, an opera, and the client says, I need an auditorium for 2,000 and the rehearsal auditorium and things like that, we just programming this wish of the client. Then our office goes in a bar and celebrates. After 2 days, we come back and the whole thing is finished. Then we are working on the model, a 3D model, the physical model, changing it a little bit. Then we are going back into Deep Himmelblau, the co-worker 1 and 2, and then we give an order to our co-worker 3, the BIM. He should make all the plans, and we write on our honorarium to the client. When the money is in, we are going on to the Maldives and have holidays for 2 months. Because everything is done by a machine. That is my dream. I don't have to work anymore. I just decide on the shape and form a little bit, but the logic thing is done by by the 2 other co-workers called A. 3 other co-workers, A1, A2, and A3. This is how we started Himmelblau in '68. And we said we had a very complicated name. It means Himmelblau means sky blue. If you erase the L from Himmelblau, then the meaning changes from the sky blue into building the sky. And we always wanted to build our project, and we said we wanted to build clouds, which are architecture which is changing like clouds. And this was our dream when we started. And now maybe it's possible. It takes another 10 years maybe, and then it's okay. And on the other side, when we started to promote buildings which were built by robots, everyone said, oh, you guys, you will make all the workers on the building site hungry, they will be fired. And we wanted to make a study what we can do with these workers on the site when robots are taking over. But no one understood what we are talking about. And I think Europe will be behind the times when the Chinese are coming to Europe and build all the buildings with robots. And this will happen very soon. Yeah, I like this. I like buildings which could change and will be buoyant like clouds. This is a comparison of the building industry and the architect. My friend, this brain researcher, Wolf Singer, he's very famous in Europe and very, very far ahead of investigating our brain, how the brain is working. He compares this computer with the brain of a fly, and he said that the fly can make decisions in milliseconds in order to survive. The computer, if he could dream, he will dream that he could be so fast like the brain of the fly. And I compared this picture with the situation of the building industry and the architect. The building industry is the most stupid and slow industry you can imagine. And we architects are very flexible and very, very fast in inventing new things. But we, how I said, the building culture is behind. Drawing, making drawings. I always depend on drawings and other things in order to try to integrate mistakes and errors, and coincidences in our work, because coincidences are the trigger point of a forthcoming evolution. I'm not drawing anymore with the pen or with the with the pen. I'm drawing on the computer in the 3D things, that this is what's going to happen. Sooner or later, I will be able to draw in the 3rd dimension as well. We are working on this program. And of course, this is just for the home office, because I'm depending always on models, on built things. So we communicate if I'm staying at home or far away via this avatar meeting room where we can discuss the three-dimensional project. Yeah, this is Daniel's interpretation of the Himmelblau universe. And what's interesting is that you can see on the left side that there are images which doesn't belong to architectural ideas. They came from other levels. Nevertheless, we will integrate it if the AI has learned how to deal with our forms and shapes. Yeah, get closer and closer. He learned already almost all our projects. And now we can start to work on the shape and gestalt of the project. What I'm missing in all these things, I like that because this is the end of Corbusier, namely to define joints. Everything is floating into each other. And this is a very remarkable next step in architecture. I don't know how the industry will work on that, but we are designing already materials which going into each other with no joints, which is almost impossible to build in this stupid with this stupid building industry. Yeah? But this is how the computer learned to use our things. So the next step is AI2, where we integrate all our plans and sections so that we can follow up not only creating new shapes, but also creating new ground plans, sections, and details. This is the next step and a very important step. Otherwise, we are only in, this is our procedure, how we work on projects in our office right now. For instance, this is only this on the left side, the camera input is organized by hand, so to say, an organized building. Plans and sections are done, and we did a model and let the AI play with the shape so that we can maybe use some of the ideas to bring this model into reality. What I like on this movie is the colors are really crazy and reminded me not only because of the color, also because of the shape on the building of, on the painting of Francis Bacon, which is one of my favorite painter. It could be done by the AI as well, but I don't know whether it will touch this emotional level. This painting shows up when you can see it. Also, it's a project coming up in Russia on the Crimea. It's a harbor with a conference center. And this is what I like. Using our shapes, meshing it together in a very irrational way, and a building will come out sooner or later. So, but since we are building always models, and this is our studio right now, but maybe in 10 years, it will look like that. The guys sitting here will be with me on the Maldives on holiday because AI is doing all our work. Yeah, clouds. And thank you. Thank you. Finished. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks. Well, that was terrific. I'm just wondering how we
I
should.
would follow up. Can I just
Yeah.
say a sentence? It's very important what you are doing because, like I said in the last lecture, the schools are now the driving points in order to experiment everything, almost everything, because the young guys have to be prepared to influence the new structures which are not born yet, but they will come up sooner or later. And by having all the tools at hand, they can really put in their imagination in the growing of the new structures. You said that, and therefore I appreciate that, what you are doing with your students, Neil. Okay.
Thanks, Wolf. That was terrific. It was so inspiring. One thing I'd say is that when I was teaching at the AA, I'd often see Rem Koolhaas turning up to lectures to find out about new information. And I think it's how the office remains incredibly vital and young and youthful, because you yourself are so willing to embrace new ideas, new ways of thinking, despite the fact that you're already in charge of the discipline itself. I want to, before bringing Daniel on, and I really wanted to have Daniel come in because he's someone I've inspired me over the years. He's done some amazing work with you. But I want to invite some questions. And first of all, I see that Peter Russell has a question. So maybe, Peter, would you like to ask it? Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I've unmuted. Wolf, one of the things that I'm worried about is the focus on form.
Yeah, that's
Architecture is not about just form. It's about a system. It's about a mechanism to deliver our clients a reasonable solution to their need for built environment. And how do you see that AI will help that?
I didn't make it clear. Look at my background. It's not form, it's a built building, because we always want to build. Therefore, we have to manipulate everything which brings us to a Gestalt, which is my goal in architecture. And Gestalt is not only form, it's not only technique or organization, it's the synthesis of all the things you have to deal with as an architect. Yeah, it's understandable what I said.
Yes, except that I really think that the, let's say, the DNA of architecture is not something that comes from BIM as a end result. It has to come as a start. So I'm worried that if we start talking about artificial intelligence with the architectural design, that we worry too much about form and rather about the performance and the details of our buildings.
Why are you so afraid of form?
I'm not afraid of form. I'm not at all. But it's a very aesthetic thing. We can't defend it one way or the other. One can say it's good or bad. We can say it's nice or unnice, ugly or beautiful. But that's a very human subjective quality. And I don't want to take away from that. I think that that's a very beautiful thing to have beauty as a goal, but everyone's beauty is different. on the other hand, our clients want definable performance of our buildings, and that's part of our responsibility as architects.
Yeah, but it's
Maybe
not true.
one thing we could add is
This is what I think architects are suffering on, namely the obedience in advance. Never ever great architecture has taken care of a client. Look at the pyramids. Can you imagine that Imhotep were asking the master pharaoh, can I do it as a pyramid, or should I do it as a ball, or should he do it as a box? Never ever. He proposed to the client, it should like a pyramid, and he did it.
But Wolf, that means you say to your clients, forget your investors, forget your finance. Your design needs to drive everything.
Too much on your client? Don't you have an idea what architecture should be? It's not fulfilling the hysterical turbo-capitalistic investors. If you
it's not to be subservient, but it's to be responsible.
Can I interfere here for a second, please? Because I think that is going out of hand a little bit.
Yeah, no, Matthias, please come in. Yeah.
So, I mean, to Peter's point, I have to say you have to have a bit of patience. We're just at the beginning of this development. The majority of things you were asking for are possible, but everyone has a different focus on this topic. Wolf has another topic than maybe you or me. So it's totally fair to use this technology in a variety of different ways. And that's the wonderful thing about it. That's not focused on one topic. So because one person is focusing on the formal or aesthetic qualities of what this thing can achieve does not mean that all the other things are not possible. They are, and they're also implemented in this.
Can I say something?
I agree.
My aphorismus is always, everybody is right, but nothing is correct.
Exactly. I completely agree. But I have another question, maybe.
Agreed.
It maybe goes to another direction.
Yes, please, yeah.
Yes, so I would, because I'm super interested in a couple of things that Wolf mentioned about their history in designing and their interest in the accident, so to speak, is something that produces an architectural design outcome. And what is really interesting is that because we're talking here about neuroscience and about how, let's say, these sort of mistakes happen in our brain and how we then interpret them as a possibility to design something, it's definitely going towards aspects of the subconscious. And you mentioned Wolf Singer, who you have been talking to about this. And, you know, his interest in higher cognitive performance, attention, identification. He wrote this amazing book with, who was that? Gerhard Roth, I think, the Manifesto, where they discuss all these topics. And so my question is, do you think that it's possible to encode in the work that you guys are doing with Deep Himmelblau, this sort of subconscious decision-making process that you are applying when you're trying to sketch something, for example? So is, for example, the results that are coming out of Deep Himmelblau for you comparable to, let's say, a sketch that you did with closed eyes?
To be honest, I don't know. We have to investigate that. And if I will see that it doesn't work to make the whole technical thing emotional enough, then we will find a way to do so. Like we worked a model, physical model, put it in a computer, model, physical model, then we change it, going back into the computer. So we will see. I'm very suspicious that the logical aspect Peter always referred to, namely client, money, and thing is taking over. This is my. I'm afraid of that.
Wolf, it wasn't about the client and the money. It's about the responsibility as architects.
To whom are you responsible?
The society. Are you
society,
making a building that will?
I'm very responsible I give the people identification in an anonymous fabric of these sad cities which are surrounding us, so to say. I'm very responsible, but I don't say that everything should be done my way. But I am like Brunelleschi did it very different to all the other Renaissance people. But like I said, everyone is right, but nothing is correct. I don't know the way we should go, but I know the way I will go, and we'll see when the buildings are finished. We always see what we can do better and what we should leave out. This is a
I agree, Rolf.
Yeah,
I agree, Wolf, that our every time we attempt to design something is going to be a mistake.
But maybe we can move on, because I don't want to get sidelined to this avenue. I think it's worth saying that that there are many forms of AI, many forms of approaches, and indeed AI can be used for many different things. I think in Vienna itself there is an institute which is developing a number of tools for looking at questions of performance, which I think is amazing in itself, and we don't think we should overlook that. I mean, I would simply say, Peter, no one's been more critical about obsession with aesthetics as myself, but I think they are super important to inspire people, and to in fact they have the role as well in terms of kind of making the world a better place to live in. I'd like to.
I agree. Neil, I only want to say maybe as a thing, and I'll shut up, is that when this question comes up, that we need to think about how we're going to educate the next generations. And that's where it then becomes very interesting in the idea of what does an architect or urban planner need to know to be responsible for the guidance of the built environment.
Sure. No, I think we're looking at things step by step. Next week we'll be looking at a lot of those kind of questions and introducing some of the new ideas. What I wanted to focus on is the kind of the way in which Wolf and Daniel have been really developing Deep Himmelblau as a new way of generating form, experimental and progressive in its own right, which I think is important.
It's not about form.
Okay.
I have to say it's not about form. It gives us many possibilities to house and elaborate all the issues architects have to elaborate by doing a building. And you are right, Peter. I know that the students now are playing much too much with just looking at the form, and then if you ask them where is north, that on your plans they have no idea what north means. Yeah, you're right. So we have to integrate all these things together. Yeah, and all the energy systems will be which gives us the possibility to create energy by the building itself. We are working on that since the 90s, yeah? But no one wants to pay for it. They always say, oh, very nice that you can trigger energy also for the district with your building, but it's too expensive for us. So these guys are not responsible. We are responsible. We are responsible. We try to propose a lot of things. Whether they build it, whether they take it, it depends on the money makers. I don't trust too much to the money makers.
And I think the discussion here is not about necessarily formalism or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you look at Blau, we are creating crazy, let's say, forms that are flying in the air. But that doesn't mean that our buildings are not standing. Like there are so many examples, like Busan Opera, Busan Cinema Center, that it's this kind of huge cantilever in a way that if you start to design irrationally, you'll never end up with that solution. Yeah, you'll never end up with that kind of cantilever. But you start with this kind of like free of this kind of constraints, and then you find a solution how to materialize that. Yeah. So if you look at Kupion buildings, they are all like insane, like when it comes to how interesting they are, but they are still functionable, they are still working, yeah? But we are not starting in a way with this kind of assumption that a building has to be done in this way or that way. Otherwise, it's not going to work, yeah? We are always starting with, why not doing it this way? Why not challenging this? And then we are going to figure out how we are going to make it work. And if you look at
I agree with you, Daniel. I think that the Eiffel Tower is a perfect example where Eiffel proposed this monstrosity, and everyone thought it would ruin Paris. And instead it served its purpose and became the icon of the city. So design is not something you can rationalize away. On the other hand, Eiffel was an engineer, so he had figured out a way to pre-bore all of the steel to make sure that it took only 6 months to put the thing up. So there, on one hand, there's the vision, and the other hand, there's the responsibility to make sure that it works.
Peter, can I just move on? We need to open up to other sort of questions and not get too locked into this one. I want to invite Marina, who has a question in the audience, to say her.
Hello everyone. Thank you, Neil, and thank you everyone. Thank you, Wolf, for being here. For me, you are one of my heroes. I mean, I'm always I'm still studying your new production and also all the architecture that your office make all over the years. And I believe that your position, not only as an architect, also as a thinker, and this way you have like to experiment every time with your designs is absolutely a great example for all of us, for all the younger generation, even for my students. So thank you for this. And I will make my question, because I remember, Wolf, you mentioned the scene in the movie Deer Hunter, when Robert De Niro asked for 3 ballots playing the Russian roulette. And with that strategy, here and Christopher Walken escape of the Viet Congs. And at that time, you said that in relation with these 3 ballots, that if we want to do architecture, we must triple the risks. And in relation to that, I keep asking myself, what is to be an architect today in the context of artificial intelligence? And in which extent we are, in a way, like a kind of, I don't know, like hackers playing with these 3 ballots all the time. I don't know if are 3 or are more. So in a way, in relation with that, I keep wondering, I mean, if we are like a kind of hackers playing this Russian roulette all the time, I would like to know, from your point of view, from your perspective, what are these 3 ballots today for you? And what are the risks that we are taking today into respect with the AI?
I have no idea. To be honest, I have no idea. We are still in the risk when we are proposing a building to the client or to the committee that we are losing this project. And we try to, and Peter, I have to say, there is a big misunderstanding in our discussion. Yeah, you and me are on the same track. If I understood what you are talking about, responsibility, I would say Daniel mentioned this cantilevering roof. It's a symbol for a public space. It's not just for cantilevering, but a symbol for a dynamic public space in Busan. So to your question, we always take risk. I always have. You have to explain the public what that means. Yeah, they have 3 playing Russian roulette and have 3 bullets in the pistol instead of 1. Yeah, we are taking risks wherever we are planning, wherever we are building. Not by building, because I would say I'm very old-fashioned trained architect. My father was an architect, and I was in his office since I was, I think, 8 years. So I know what architecture is, and I know what the craftsman means. So not taking risk in building it, this is no problem. Today, it's no problem. Maybe not in Russia, but it's no problem to build the most daring spaces you can imagine. But the risk, we take, the whole office is taking a risk when we propose things which no one can imagine that it could be built, that it could work. And I have to say, all our buildings are very well organized. That shows the very well organized, Lyon and everything, because we are thinking about that very carefully. And we're thinking about the money as well, but we invent structures which could save money. For instance, in Lyon, we invented a column which is supporting the whole crystal, the lobby crystal, and it saves 1/3 of the weight of the steel, meaning it serves 1/3 of the budget. So this is not, we are thinking a different way. We are thinking we want to do it, and then how can we do it? Why do we do things like that? Because a museum is very responsible for the knowledge of people. And and we make a symbol out of it, and we make an icon. This is the goal. And
Wolf, I would agree with you. We need these icons. We need these examples of the way to move forward. And we have to just be careful as architects, because we are entrusted, each of us individually, to make the world a better place. And we have to be careful that if we miss a step, i.e. CO2, recyclability, circulation, energy efficiency, that we then are in a precarious place. But in the end, design will be the answer.
So I don't want to sideline this. Matthias and I were both part of this panel judging this project in Shanghai, and there were many of these issues that were part of the project itself. And I don't want to sort of overlook that. Maybe I could invite Matthias to kind of comment on those things.
Yeah. So I mean, one thing that I think we have to keep in front of our eyes is that just because a building looks different, it doesn't mean it doesn't perform like a normal box. I think that's a very important thing to understand. I mean, and in regards to how to use artificial intelligence, I pointed it out that there's different ways to skin a cat. And if I look, for example, into what X-Cool is doing, and they're like really on performance-driven ideas about using artificial intelligence, that's the opposite. Like there's different ways of using this technology. And I admit that, maybe Daniel, Wolf, maybe myself, we like the idea of interrogate it as a tool that inspires us as architects to push forward in different directions, which doesn't mean, by the way, that these are just iconic buildings or landmarks. I think this is the wrong thinking. It might be a different kind of architecture, but just because it doesn't look like what we're used to as something normal that performs well, doesn't mean it does not perform well. Wolf pointed out, for example, that every single building he does is very well laid out in terms of what the plan and the section does, which he better has to, because otherwise it doesn't get built. I mean, architecture that looks different has to be even more convincing in terms of how it performs, because otherwise people don't do them. Yeah. So I think this is a very clear question for me. It's just a matter of, where is the discussion today? Are we discussing about the cultural aspects of what AI is bringing into the architecture office, or just the technical aspects that it's bringing into the office? Because both things can be discussed, but this discussion is one of many we have had in this FIU series of conversations, each one focusing on something different. Yeah. So, and today we're discussing how our offices, like Wolf's office or Tom Main's office, using these new technologies in order to propel their agenda in terms of architecture design.
we are not that far that we can use the AI to build things, I have to say. It's for us, it's like Matthias said, it's very inspirational for me, at least, because I can read it as a building. And yeah, I can read it. Not everyone can read it as a building, but I'm used to that, to read crazy shapes as well as a building which could work. This is because I have experience since years to do so. But I think everything students are trying right now is very important for the future of architecture. I don't know whether the profession of being an architect will last in the future. I have no idea. I think, you know, if the AI is if big offices, machines, so to say, taking over, they can build Himmelblau buildings that just go into our file and say, okay, we can do a Himmelblau building much cheaper than they can do, and they get the commission. Or Tom Main, we can copy Tom Main, we can, he's taking his solution. That's possible.
Well,
yeah.
I would like to ask Hei-Wen Yu, who is has had time with OMA and others, and has now had her own architectural artificial intelligence architectural office. If she could comment on how we need to improve our education.
Wan-Yu, do you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks for asking me. Actually, we are also thinking of how to teach or guiding the young architects, because in my office we got a lot of applications from young architects. What they are looking for is not just being a traditional way of working, just drawing and building models. They are looking for new technologies to help them to open their minds, to do new ways of design. So I think the most important thing is to help them to understand what is the design and what is creation. That is the most important thing. Besides that, we can talk about form or technology. So we have courses for our trainings or young architects in our office. What is about design? Okay, I would like to say from our understanding point of view, design is kind of a operational management, let's say. We have to review all possible effects and try to understand the reason why and choose the positioning and take the balance, or even you take the extreme, but that's your attitude, that's your position you're taking. And this entire thing is called design. You build a system. And creation is you made some very interesting move in between in this entire process. And something maybe someone hasn't do it before, or even it had, but there's also something new. Or if it's not something new, but you made this entire system very, let's say, very active or efficient, etc. So that's my point of view for the education. I don't think it's just about technology, the skill, or form or function. I think form function, this topic has been centuries. We should not just talking about that. I think we go to the more essential thing. This is very similar to where I worked in OMA. We not only talking about form or function, we're talking about the more broader things. I think that is something we release the limitation of architectural design. Yeah, that's my point. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much, Wendy. Just for Wolf, just for your information, Wendy was working for Rem Koolhaas, and she has a company called XCool, which is based in Shenzhen, where they're developing AI tools, and I think probably the largest company now in terms of promoting this, and so very much kind of integrating a design approach into the whole thing. And next week we'll get a chance to, Wendy will be presenting her stuff, so we'll get a chance to talk about those things.
Yeah, the funny thing, I have a theory about all
Thanks,
this.
Neil.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yes.
I have a theory about all these different architectural expression, let's say it that way. Whether you want it or not, you are influenced by the culture you are brought up. And I said, okay, it's impossible to imagine that Rietveld would have done his house in Vienna. The other way around, it's impossible to think that Kiesler would have developed this endless house in Holland, because there are very different cultural backgrounds which are implanted in your subconscious. So I say, with Saha, we almost were talking the same language, but our designs look very, very different. And talking about Tom Main and me, we can talk about drawings, but he is very different because maybe of the Protestantic background of the American architects. And my Jewish friends, they are talking Kabbalah in all their buildings, whether they want it or not. So I know that the Dutch guys are very fixed on the diagrams. Never ever an Austrian architect would talk about diagrams. They talk different things, and AI, for instance, is a different thing. And this is very interesting to watch that. But like I said, everyone is right, but nothing is correct.
Wolf, one thing I really appreciate about you, I always listen to your lectures over and over again, because each time I kind of find some level of depth in it. I think there's a lot of thinking that's going on there. And what I also find interesting is, I mean, coming out of Vienna, you claim not to be a theorist, but I've never heard anybody speak about Freud and Singer and Popper and Derrida as much as you do. And I think that it is precisely the fact you're coming out of this incredible milieu of Vienna, which is all these debates are coming in, and Wittgenstein too. It was a kind of melting pot.
Could be. Therefore, I really think that I'm very fond of this so-called deconstructivism, because Derrida was a student of Freud, and Freud, like Matthias said, the unconscious is a big deal in the Viennese discussion as well. So this is very important. Freud and Jung, the archetypes in architecture, the collective subconscious of finding forms, very interesting, very interesting. But like I said, everyone is right, but nothing is correct. Trial and error.
No, I completely appreciate it. And I think actually the whole world of neuroscience is opening up in an interesting new way and taking over in some senses. We've been interested in the way in which you look at the hallucinations of the in terms of contemporary neuroscience, and how those hallucinations and the machine hallucinations kind of come together in a super interesting kind of way. I wanted fairly soon to move on to Daniel Bolojan so he can explain the technical side of things, but I have another question from the audience first of all. I'd like to invite Elena, who is from Russia, to ask her question.
Good day, Wolf. I'm your big fan, and thank you for everything what you do for architecture. And I have a little bit. I have two questions. First is about Crimea, and yeah, it's being Russian. So I was very excited to see this project in your presentation, because in newspaper it was delivered as gossips or rumors, and now since you put this building in your presentation, it's kind of confirmation that it's happening. I'm very curious that despite all this political pressure and sanctions that a lot of big celebrity architects trying to avoid working with Crimea, what was standing behind this decision to take this still project? And as you mentioned earlier in Marina's answer to Marina's question, that architects have to always take risks. So what was behind this decision? And the second question, do you think architectural office can become fully automated?
Second question first. No, I don't think so. There is a thing which gives me a lot of thinking in the last couple of, let's say, years. There is a saying of Fromm, Eric Fromm. You know him? He's a psychoanalyst. You know Eric Fromm? Yeah. He said, if a society delegates liveliness to machines, that expresses the dead wish of the society. So I don't know. This is my thing, my thinking about AI as well. Yeah, but let's see how it will develop. And to Crimea, I tell you a story. We never ever built a building for the client. I never ever, I said that so many times. I don't build an opera building in Crimea for Putin. I build it for the people of Sevastopol and the people of Crimea. So that's easy. Whether the people say I'm the murderer of the Ukrainians or not is another story. And Marina, I got the question to how can I play with 3 bullets? I got a call from the ambassador of Ukraine 2 months ago, and he said to me, if you don't give back this commission, I will ruin your existence and the existence of your office. Yeah, and 20 years ago, I would have said, fuck you, and I would have hung up. Now, because I'm older and more settled, I say, okay, Mr. Ambassador, if the Ukraine gives me 5 projects in the Ukraine, I will consider to give back the opera building, and he hung up. And I got a shitstorm in Little Austria that I'm the murderer of the Ukrainians and things like that. So I don't care about that because I say it again, I build schools not for the mayor of Vienna, I build it for the students. And I build opera and museum not for the whoever is the commission, gives me the commission. I not build it for the guy, I build it for the people there. That I am a little bit challenged the taste, yeah, quotation, yeah, the taste of the people who are not used to see this kind of shapes, but when they are going in, they start to love it. Otherwise, I cannot explain that Lyon has more than 2 million a year as visitors. Of course, because of the exhibitions, but the exhibitions and the spaces are, let's say, inviting. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. I would love to see the 2 buildings in Kemerovo and Crimea.
Yeah, Crimea. Do you know that the opera building is they're just building the foundations?
I just want to say that Wolf, I'm also one of those your fans, and I just think that the passion you're putting into something is extraordinary. I mean, I don't know whether Matthias remembers this, but when we were in that judging panel, you came in so full of life, and you wanted the project, and I'm sure that Shanghai will be a better place for this building. So, Marina, do you have a question now, or should we? Yeah.
Yes. More between a comment and a question. So finally, in terms of taking risk on our 3 bullets, so you finally, I mean, you can say that maybe the office of the future is an office of hackers, because also in terms of Daniel Bollesen work in Top Human now, it's part of this, and we as a generation, we are like more than ever a generation of hackers. So we are following your ideas in that as well.
So, yeah, that's a great point. Maybe that's how
they will build boxes. Yeah, they build boxes with AI. They build boxes because it's cheaper and faster, and they will earn more money. This is the danger.
So I think that's a great opportunity to move on to Daniel, who I always think is a kind of hacker in the most intelligent possible way, that's really helped in terms of pushing forward the questions about AI and how they can be implemented in the office. Perhaps, Daniel, you'd like to say a few words about the kind of the AI aspect and what was really behind the Deep Himmelblau project, because I mean, just to say that Daniel was the was behind it. One thing, Wolf, I have to tell you one thing, that you inspired me enormously. And I was in Minco in Bucharest once giving a lecture about you and other people and about computation. In the audience, there was a young student called Daniel Bolajan, and he changed his life. So I can't claim responsibility for that, but I at least well, you were behind everything, right? Okay, but that's what triggered that whole thing off, and it's great to see Daniel carrying on to work in your office. I mean, one of the challenges I would say in terms of office management is how do you invest the time and energy into these new technologies when the office is funded by these projects, and the fact that you found time to invest in this, I think, is a wonderful example. We are other offices as well doing this kind of thing, but not so many. And I think it's fantastic that you are keeping open this channel of inquiry, of kind of bridging the kind of academic world and bringing Daniel in to kind of inform things. So, Daniel, do you like to say something? We'll come back and have some further questions later.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Are you able to see? So I'm just going to barely scratch the surface, because Deep Himmelblau, it's a very vast in a way project, and right now probably that slide where Mr. Priggs was showing a sort of diagram with kind of process where we engage with Deep Himmelblau, probably that was easily like forgotten in a way, but that diagram actually shows like the span of how far we try to go with Deep Himmelblau in the process that we work with. So this quote from John Culkin, it was almost like at the core of when we started Deep Himmelblau. We become what we behold, we shape our tools, and then our tools shape us. Yeah. And in Deep Himmelblau, I think Mr. Priggs, he will be able to speak more about this. You always deal with this kind of challenges of designing. Yeah. So, for example, last Tuesday, I actually asked a question of Mr. Priggs, like how is Deep Himmelblau able to keep on track with the original idea? Yeah. Because if you're looking at Deep Himmelblau projects, most of the time you have this kind of initial idea that can be seen from the start to the end in a way of the project. And the idea is that during the design process, you always have this kind of challenging moments. You have the client, you have budget, you have regulations, you have politics, you have all these kind of challenges. And then how do you find a way to still continue push your design idea without losing, in a way, the quality of design? Yeah. And Mr. Priggs' answer was something in the line of, you always have this kind of challenges, and you have to somehow turn these kind of challenges into opportunities. So you just have to find ways then how to actually, or to create tools that help you, to go beyond those obstacles. Yeah. So in Deep Himmelblau and Deep Himmelblau in Spatial, the project is, right now, of course, there is a strong emphasis on the aesthetical part of things. But like I was also mentioning before, that that's just the way that you start the project. Doesn't mean that the project now is going to ignore all the other aspects that are extremely important. So in this instance, for example, Deep Human Blau is also used then at aspects of fabrication, optimizations of facades and so on, which are crucial in a way topics for us to be able to deliver the projects in time and on budget. So all these things, they might come across as being boring, but these are tools that we actually use. We use to really help us get beyond these kind of regulations and these kind of challenges that you have in a design process and still keep on track with your design. So I'm just giving them, some background here that in the end, Deep Human Blau has multiple applications in the office. So in this case, for example, so we have Deep Human Blau has nodes that deal with aspects of environmental, in a way, simulation and those kind of topics we also bring in, but perhaps they are not necessarily at the center core when we design. When we design, we have some ideas, concept that those are the ones that are driving things, and then we make sure that those designs, they are also actually feasible. So here, this is how Deep Human Blau started. Actually, it started, I think, with the Deep Dream, and we were looking at this kind of like examples, of can we have a sketch and then have an interpretation of that sketch by sampling, a data set or putting together a data set. And this, I think, was the very first week of Deep Human Blau. These were the very first results that we got after about 1 week. And then, of course, we started to look into other aspects of pix-to-pix, like kind of networks where you're actually drawing a sort of label, and then the AI, it's going to output a sort of facades like this, or places. And yeah, this is also something that Mr. Briggs also showed. But for us, it was always like, how can we, in a way, augment our design processes? How can we, in a way, have this kind of tool? Because it's not about we are using Deep Human Blau to automate design or something. It's about how can we use this kind of tool to better, in a way, to help us to design, let's say, more interesting designs in combination with all the other tools that we are using. So this is not a way to just exclude the other tools. It's always this kind of like feedback, in a way, process where you engage with certain tools, you get a feedback, then you as a designer probably have a reaction towards that, and then you change design decisions and so on. So this is normally a sort of design process that it's very common in Deep Human Blau. And then we started to look at, okay, how can we bring, in a way, this kind of technology, and how can we augment perhaps certain design processes at certain levels. So here you see that we are already talking about physical models, and then how you have perhaps real-time analysis, so that when we are designing with a physical model, for example, or not designing, but experimenting, let's say, with a physical model, can you have some real-time feedback regarding analysis, environmental or other types of analysis. So in the end, then you have this kind of back and forth process. And then, of course, this started to spread, like the entire design process in the office, where we started to interrogate all these kind of process that we engage with, and try to see where will be where we can use this kind of technology in a way to really augment our design process. And of course, we start to look at multiple kind of ways of doing that. Like, can we create perhaps very fast automatic renders? Probably is not really that interesting from a perspective of design, but we are always looking, in a way, at multiple levels of how this can be used. So it's you have to understand Deep Human Blau is not just a image generator, let's say, although that's a very important part of it. But we are very careful with the way that we are also organizing things behind. So Mr. Briggs was mentioning that a step that we still have to make here is like, how do you organize, let's say, building. Yeah, maybe that's something that DPMLAW is missing right now. But more or less, like we are trying to engage all these kind of important topics with this kind of technology. So here we are looking at multiple kind of ways of can I have physical model, can I have digital models, and then have in a way this kind of interpretations? Can I have physical models and have this kind of interpretation suggestions in a way of potential design? And of course, here what you end up with is a sort of a translation happening between two domains, where you have on one side you have a physical model, on the other side you have a footage, for example, of a render, and then you have this kind of machine trying to create this kind of translation. Yeah. So DPMLAW, it's a very complex, I would say, network that borrows a lot of ideas from pigs to pigs, from CycleGAN, from StyleGAN, from query networks. So there are a lot of like ideas that are in a way borrowed, yeah, from there. But many times, like we use this kind of tools not necessarily to automate. Like I said, yeah, it's not about automation, it's about augmentation in a way. It's about, can we challenge our perceptions of something? Yeah. So for example, if you were to look at this physical model, just as a designer, the way that you are trained, you are looking at this physical model and you're automatically going to say, this is a top view of a building, there is a ramp and there is a tower. Yeah. So you're already going to start to describe the composition, and you're going to constrain yourself or constrain your interpretation of that model to your own understanding or your own training. Yeah, you're just so much trained as an architect to see things in that kind of way. But then you have this kind of network that suddenly looks at that result, and it's actually challenging that way of seeing. Yeah. And I think that this is where we start to find things interesting, yeah, because we can almost like say blindside the sort of network and say, now you look at certain footage of a physical model, but you're not going to look at it as a top view, but you're going to look at it purely just at the compositional level. And then suddenly you have these kind of novel interpretations that normally as a designer, you're constrained by your own, in a way, training as an architect, and also your own consciousness. In a way, you're just so aware of what you see there that you cannot, in a way, just forget and like try to interpret things completely different. So the same happens also here. So you have the physical model, it's very clearly, when you look at it, it's very clear what that is, but the interpretation you see out of the network is actually something super interesting. So the same happens also here. Like, can I have, if I were to look here at the physical model, I will never think perhaps of this kind of almost like branching kind of structure happening on top of that. But you can have this kind of DPMLAW network that actually challenges, in a way, the way you interpret things. And that can be also perhaps constrained in certain aspects or allowed free in other aspects, yeah? So I think from my perspective, the amazing thing about this is that really I can go in and particular things in the network, I can say the network has to be blinded to this aspect or this aspect, yeah? And then generate something according to that, yeah? So here, again, the same kind of ideas. And here, of course, it's also like can go the other way around. So for us here, we were looking at a lot of images of DPMLAW, and then we were looking also at images of physical models that we have in the office. And for us as humans, if you look at the building on the left side, it's very hard for you, or you are going to read a certain composition, yeah? So you're going to read the composition perhaps of this volume, you're going to read the composition of the facade, of the glass facade, and so on, yeah? So you're reading that kind of composition. But here you see that the way that the network looks at that composition is completely different, yeah? It has a different way of understanding that composition. And this kind of challenging of perception, I think it's something amazing that really can help understand different things, yeah? So the same happens here. So we look at these examples and they are so strong, it's almost like we cannot go beyond that visual, or it's very challenging, you know, to go beyond and understand the actual composition. And you have this kind of network then that you can constrained and asked to look just purely at the composition of things. Yeah. So like I was mentioning before, yeah, we are not necessarily just interested in aesthetics, because we want to have designs. And that was the example that I was giving with Busan Cinema. So in the end, it's not just a matter of design there. Like, of course, there are other like topics when it comes to public space, but then that building's actually fully functional. It's not like you're doing something amazing and then it's not working. Yeah, all the Kupyon building, actually, they're extremely efficient. And the way you do that is by really developing processes that help you in a way overcome these kind of challenges. Yeah. So we are going to generate like amazing, interesting results that have high quality, but in the same time, how do we address these kind of topics that are very pragmatic? And if you address them in a conventional way, in traditional way, you're going to end up with boxes for sure. So you have to come up with better solutions, like how you're going to solve those kind of challenges. Yeah. And for us, yeah, it's always important to mix this kind of environment. Yeah. So it's not just about like engaging with things on a screen, but it's also about like trying to understand the experience that you might have and so on. So also Mr. Priggs started to show also some aspects of VR. So we are always challenging that too. So here, this is another example of this kind of idea of constraining a network. So here you see that the network mostly understands the composition as a facade, is not understanding it as a perspective or something. Yeah. So this is the same. Like, how can you challenge your own like preconceived way of looking at things? Yeah. So here we have just a small sample of some data sets that we have in DPM and very early stages when we started to go a bit more and develop the DPM network. And early on, as you can see, the kind of results that you get, they're very, very interesting. I mean, no one says that they're not interesting, but they are very cloudy, very undefined in a way, which could be a good design quality in the end, yeah, that you look for. But we start to push more and more to try to achieve, you know, a higher quality and to gain perhaps more control over this kind of networks. And this is just a way to display the design space of Kupyon. So these are like all representations of Kupyon projects, just to show how vast in a way the design range is in Kupyon. Yeah. So you're not dealing with an office that has a style, let's say, that is very homogeneous. Yeah. That it's just bare iterations or something. Yeah. Or variations of something. Yeah. In other examples out there, architectural offices, I bet if you run this kind of algorithm and try to understand the style of the office, I bet that you end up with things that are extremely homogeneous, almost like one big cluster, and that's all. Yeah. But in the case of Kupyon, actually, you have a huge, vast, in a way, range. Yeah. Which is an amazing thing, but in the same time, it's very challenging. How do you learn correctly things in this way? So, for example, in the case of DPM, how exactly can a network learn this kind of space that is not homogeneous? Yeah. Because in neural networks, usually you have to give a lot of in neural networks, you have to give a lot of data points for the network to learn. So in our cases, then let's say that you have a few projects that are very well represented, but you have another project over here that you just have a few samples of. Yeah. So then it's an entire question of the learning process of the network that goes behind. Yeah. So if you remember also last week, I showed the Sagrada Familia project where I was actually dealing with this kind of topics of how can you build up a network that is able actually to understand information with few data points, yeah, not huge data sets. Yeah. So here's the same kind of discussion. How can you fine tune that kind of network, and how can you create the architecture of the network to look at all these examples and not, in a way, consider one example that is very well represented over another one that is not that much represented. Yeah. Because what you want to do, you don't want to, in a way, overpower certain parts of the copy and Blau style or repertoire, let's say, to the others. Yeah, copy and Blau overall, it's a very vast repertoire, design space. So you don't want to have a network that flattens in a way that, yeah, you want to have a network that actually is aware of the intricacy and complexity of copy and Blau. So here we have a first, in a way, result from DP and Blau after we start to develop all these kind of topics of how the network is learning and a lot of other improvements. And here what you have is this kind of like very algorithmic, in a way, a driven process where you're walking through a latent space. So what the latent space is, it's almost like a sort of n-dimensional space that describes, in a way, the features of the network. Yeah. So here I'm just showing then some progress. So we will keep on improving the network, and this was something in 2019 we were working on this. And I'm showing this just to say like the speed at which, in a way, DP and Blau started to pick up and learn a lot of semantic information. So here we have like further improvements and further improvements. And then we have the same kind of testing and try to see how the network learns, if the improvements are moving in the right direction or not. And here, when I'm saying the right direction, I'm just talking about, we are looking at images that are a bit more defined, let's say, that could show clearer, in a way, features, yeah, or clearer graphics that can represent, let's say, architecture or architecture elements. So here we always engage with many topics. So some of you that already know some of my work, it's never a question about using one network and suddenly just outputting results. It's always a question of this kind of like very elaborated process that goes behind. Yeah. So in these instances, the way that you're trained the network and the way that you encode certain information keeps in mind a lot of ideas about other levels of information, not purely just the aesthetics or the visuals of things. Yeah. So in this case, for example, we have all our projects in the office. We have them. We have extracted about 17 parameters that are extracted for each building. And we have this kind of huge data sets, in a way, that really give us information about different aspects, yeah, from material IDs to normal vectors to depth maps and a lot of other topics that are important, in a way, to understand those designs and also enhance certain things versus or emphasize and de-emphasize certain things, yeah. So these are just progress now. You see from September 2019, October 2019, and December 2019, like there was a huge, in a way, jump. And usually these jumps, you can see them based on certain improvements that were made to the network. And when I'm saying improvements, I'm talking about either the types of filters, the types of methods of how the network is learning, and this kind of topics, yeah. That's where the improvements mostly are done. So here then you see like very nicely defined now results in comparison with the first ones that were very cloudy, very noisy in a way. Yeah, so here then at the end of that year 2019, December 2019, so this is then the same kind of idea of walking through a latent space. So this is an algorithmic walk in the sense of what you're doing. You're just asking, in a way, the network to look at one seed in the latent space, and then you're asking the network to search the closest, in a way, seed to that initial seed, yeah? And then you take the second and you search for the second closest and so on. So you are progressing, in a way, through the latent space in this kind of way, in a very algorithmic way, where you are just searching for, let's say, certain features that you're asking the network output similar results that are very close in the features with this, yeah? So here then are other examples of DP on Blau. I think also Mr. Briggs already showed this kind of results. So here what we have is we start to plot out in a way the design space generated by DP on Blau. And in this instance, we have about 100,000 points in that space that now we can explore freely. As designers, we can then anytime have access to this and really explore this latent space in a very interactive way. So very often what we were doing is that we always looked at, sometimes we looked at results from DP on Blau, and we start to see similarities with some of our projects, and we will be like, yeah, that looks very similar with JVC Center, for example, or other examples that I'm going to show just in a second. But then we were also looking, can we reverse that direction? Can we actually search this kind of latent space of the network? Can we search it according to this kind of guiding images? Yeah. So here you see that you have the network actually trying to give an interpretation or trying to generate a sort of result that somehow follows, let's say, the composition that you have on this side. The same happens also here, but you'll see that in this example, probably the result was not really that good. Yeah. So here we have to figure out what's going on and why the network is not able to actually generate more interesting results according to this kind of reference. So the same happens also here. When you look initially at this result, the first thing that comes in mind is UFA, Cinema Center, and the idea is, okay, can you reverse that direction and say, if I'm showing an image of a UFA, can the network in a way create a sort of interpretation of that? Yeah. So here then again, that kind of idea of closest neighbor, let's say. So you start, let's say, with this kind of seed in the latent space, and then you can query, you can ask for, I want to have like the most similar examples from the latent space displayed next to. So you see the smaller the values near neighbor, the closer, let's say, the results are. And then the more you increase that value, the further apart the designs come. Yeah, you see that in the end, the underlying, let's say, composition of having a base and then having an object on top, it's still present. Yeah, it's just that you have quite dramatic variations now of that, and then even more dramatic variations where in some instances you end up with a completely different type of building, almost like a tower and then a base or something. And let's see, do I have? Yeah, so here, for example, this progression animated from very similar designs to further and further apart in way designs. Yeah, so for us then, all these are really interesting aspects that we are looking for in DP on Blau, and also aspects of, can we go inside a design and, let's say, affect just specific levels? Can we just say we are interested in this part of the design here, and we want to control, emphasize, de-emphasize certain aspects? Can we do that? Yeah. So DP on Blau is trying then to address all those kind of levels of design, and tries to allow control in a way to designers to engage with those levels of design. And these are just the final, let's say, slides. And that being said, I think that this will conclude my presentation. But here, yeah, this is now, It's not very technical in the sense of I just had a few hours actually to put things together, but you have to understand that DPM Blau, like I was trying to show, it's something that covers many levels and many scales of designs. Yeah, we are not trying only to generate this kind of images, although these are, I think, the most impactful ones. There are a lot of other processes where we try to engage with DPM Blau to help us in a way come up with interesting solutions, or to help us overcome perhaps certain challenges. Okay, thank you.
Daniel,
Right.
thank you. That was absolutely fabulous. It's fascinating to get an insight to what is going under the hood, under the covers, as it were, in the office. And you know, I really want to congratulate you and Wolf also in pushing this forward. I just want to throw something in here, because it kind of like, one thing I always appreciate about Wolf is actually he's more of a theorist than he would acknowledge. And I love the fact that when he refers to Derrida, he doesn't take the typical kind of architectural misunderstanding and say, oh, he used deconstruction, he must be talking about architecture. No, what Derrida is talking about is the fact that it's challenging, deconstructing ways of thinking. You know, that's the point he makes, is that there is an architecture of architecture. We have a constructed way of how we look at construction, and these things need to be challenged, not to destroy them, but rather to keep them alive. You know, you keep them alive by asking questions and challenging all the assumptions that go on in architecture. There's a very beautiful piece that Derrida wrote about Bernard Schumy's Parc de la Villette, these red cubes, and he talks about them as dice, and you're throwing the dice to give it a chance, to give architecture a chance to, and it's not about destroying, it's about absolute the opposite, about being self-critical and keeping this alive and keeping this debate alive. So that's something that I always think about what you're saying, Wolf, especially when you say you're not a theorist. I think it's absolutely incredibly important to challenge things. And, you know, to my mind, challenging, just final comment about Derrida, it's all about finding a problem or challenging to see the problem, because once you realize it's a problem, it's a different problem. It's one you can start to deal with. And I think the DPM Blau really starts challenging, apart from the technical aspects, it challenges the way in which we thought about the design process up until now, and really opens up new possibilities.
Yeah, and just to add on that, I think, and I think this is what's amazing about Wolf Prick's approach to things, is that usually as a designer, what you're going to do, you're going to almost like interpolate between your preferences or whatever. Yeah, if you are very conscious about your design and you are designing in that kind of way, you're going to mostly interpolate between designs that you have in your mind. Yeah, but if you want to challenge that, if you want to go outside of that interpolation only, where you start to challenge in a way your preconceived ideas about something, you have to develop some methods that allow you to go outside, yeah, or to challenge your own perception. And I think this is, Mr. Priggs is explaining this, the role of subconscious, yeah, in that. Yeah, like I'm trying to close my eyes and I'm going to try to just draw the way that I think that I'm going to feel when I'm going to explore the space. So in that way, I'm not bounded to this kind of like very, very boring rules of this looks good, it doesn't look good, what other people are going to say about it. Is this going to be economical? It's not going to be economical. It's going to be wood, concrete, and so on. Yeah. But yeah, Mr. Priggs, for sure, it's more capable to explain these things more in detail than I am. I think he has an entire life experience of challenging in a way, or operating in this kind of way where when you completely challenge all the time these processes.
You know, what I like on Derrida is the analytic way of texts and paintings and music pieces. What he said is, in every text, there is a sentence which is unconsciously written by the poet. And this white block, this white space, is ruling the whole text. That's so interesting. And I think it's the same way doing architecture. If you draw a line, and this is what Daniel just said, if you draw a line and say, oh, it cannot, it's too expensive. Oh, the client will not like it. Oh, the rules and codes will not allow us to do so. Then, you know, this compressed thing will, what we call normally architecture is a tamed space. Tamed in sense, it cannot move. It doesn't bring emotion to the people. You know, the people never ever see a space like we do, but they feel it with the unconscious back brain, so to say. Yeah. So therefore, I say you never can judge a building really if you didn't have seen it. Walking around, adding the fourth dimension, namely time, walking around. So this is that counts from the smallest apartment up to the largest building. Yeah. This is what I really like, and this connects Derrida with Freud and all this really important, influential thing which we used in our work, or the sentence of Einstein, who said, gravity is not a force, but the attitude of the space. Fantastic, huh? He meant it directed toward the universe, but it also counts for architecture as well. And the last thing I have to say is our society, we cannot improve the world. The architects, this is overestimating our power. Yeah. We are, whether we want it or not, we are sardines in the pool of sharks without swarm intelligence. So we cannot make the world better. Maybe in the building or in a urban design, maybe. But I think our society, I'm talking about Europe because I don't know what happened in the States right now. Our society is demasked. The bureaucracy of our society is demasked by how they deal with the virus, with the pandemic. This is a catastrophe. It shows that our societies and our politicians are working only with managing things and control things. They are not able to improve our ability to change things, because we are all, the society is afraid. They have a kind of fear of new things, which is, as it shows right now, deadly for many of us, because they cannot deal with the virus. They cannot manage the vaccine things. They are too stupid. They are really too stupid, because they are only working for their own power. So, and the same is like a friend of mine, he is in researching complexity. The same thing happens in big industries, branches, in big companies. It's the same. The people only look for their own advantage. They never look for the advantage of the whole company. It's the same in society. So it has to change, because otherwise we will not be able to solve the climate problems. We have to find new paradigms. Don't ask me how it could happen. I don't know. but it's time to think about that. Yeah, and like Daniel and like Matthias said, we have to use everything in architecture to create a new paradigms, maybe which could enable us to make the life more beautiful in our world. But politics has to change as well, and society has to change a lot in order to solve these problems. Big deal. You guys, no, not for me. 10 more years and then I'm on an island, sleeping and not thinking about architecture, but counting the coconuts. But you guys, the younger guys, they have to think about that we have to thinking in a political way as well. Otherwise, we will never, ever succeed in our ideas the young guys now develop. Yeah. It's really a dramatic situation. And it costs life here in Europe. They are not able, the European Union is not able to deal with Russia in order to get this Soviet vaccine, yeah, this Sputnik, which I heard is much better than whatever the American one. But the American block it. Yeah, it is crazy. We have to think about that the politicians are not aware that they are killing us by not deciding in an artificial, intelligent way.
Well, there's also artificial stupidity.
Yeah. Yeah, true. The stupidity is more advanced than the artificial intelligence.
Is
maybe
not
just
enough,
maybe
not
just
enough natural stupidity. We need also artificial.
To Wolf's point, which I think is really, really important, is to understand that the work you're seeing here in these presentations and these conversations we've had throughout the last couple of weeks, yes, we have been focusing on what AI does in architecture, but it's not just that. I mean, the whole AI revolution that we are currently experiencing is, of course, making an impact in the economy, ecology, politics, of course, yeah. I mean, artificial intelligence has been used for the last decade to influence politics. Just remember the 2016 election of Donald Trump, which was influenced by data that was automatically scraped from Facebook, yeah, and somebody ran a really good algorithm, which was a neural network algorithm to understand how to target people with commercials for Donald Trump. So politics is being done with AI already. Now the question is, how can we as a population turn it around so that it's done beneficially for us and not malicious, yeah, and that means people have to speak up. I try to educate my students every time I get the chance to consider that what we are discussing in terms of AI in architecture is impacting every level of society, yeah, in a really deep way. Every time they install a little app, every time they install a game on their mobile phone, they're giving consent to their addresses being shared with the person who's done that, to the camera, to the microphone of their mobile phone, etc., to their local position, yeah. So this is all valuable data. And as somebody pointed out, really, I don't remember exactly who the quote is from, but data is like raw oil. It's very valuable once it is processed to information. Yeah. So and money is getting done with it. Why don't we get the money? You're getting my data. Why don't I get the money? Why do you get the money? It's my stuff. It's my pictures. It's my music. Yeah? It's my videos. Yeah? And we are giving this away for nothing. And I think people are, at some point, they're going to be fed up with this. I'm really looking forward to the sort of AI revolution. Okay, maybe we're going to get governed then by an AI, hopefully better for everyone and not by a stupid human. I mean, maybe that's a solution. We will see. Yeah. But let me come back to the architectural aspects of. First of all, I have to say, Daniel, great presentation, was absolutely amazing. The depth of the work is just incredible. There was a quick question also in the chat about copyright things. Wolf and I, we had a chat the other day, and he told me that every single image they're using in their neural network is their own images. So every single image they made is from their own work, from the last 50 years of Corp Himmelblau. once you have such a repository, it makes absolute sense to do what Copeland Blau is doing, because it's really completely rooted in their own sensibility and architecture development over the years. And so this is doable. I do understand, however, when younger companies and younger offices are scraping images from the internet to create databases, but still, in that extent, we have to face aspects of, you know, ethics and so on. But it's another problem. I want to point out one moment in Daniel's presentation, which I thought was really very revealing and really interesting to me, was to see the combination between a very analog and instantly human way of making models, like the blue foam models. And everyone who studied in Vienna was pestered to do these models day and night. Yeah. Either from Wolf or from Holland. They were always insisting
It's gone. It's gone. It's gone.
Which is sad, because you learn something about how to build up a program, because all these little boxes represent parts of the architecture, like the program that you really have to put into this architecture. And once you understand that you're putting those things manually together, you get really understanding of what you spatially are doing there. Because architecture at the end of the day is a spatial discipline. Yeah. And the moment where this is transformed into a model that has a weird triangulated skin through neural networks, that was super interesting to me. That suddenly this very manual, deeply analog way of doing suddenly is informed by another level of information based on your own work. And I think that was really, really an interesting moment, which shows also that we have to think spatially. And that's my criticism on this, by the way. The only thing that is currently getting outputted from all the processes that we saw are images. So no 3D models, yeah? Which means that we are left again with the interpretation of how does this work in plan and section. I know this is going to be the next step, and I know Daniel is working on that already, yeah? But I think it's a very important thing to understand how the spatial relationships between what we see in the resulting images of neural networks actually complies to the interior qualities that we want to experience in that building. Wolf's background, for example, yeah, that image is a wonderful interior. Currently, our neural networks cannot deal with interior and exterior at the same time. We can do either or. But these are only in between steps. I'm just pointing them out because I think these are challenges for us as designers working with these tools to move on with them. Once more, I would like to add or emphasize that this is we're not just discussing here an architectural tool, just another rendering engine or another modeling engine. That's not what it is. Yeah. But that we because it can tie into so many different variations of data, as I mentioned before, we can transform this data into information for an architectural project, whether this is social information, economic information, aesthetic information, political information, whatever it is, we can input that ultimately into these networks and see what happens. And I'm very curious for that, what happens.
Yeah, I mean, just thank you, Matthias. And thank you, Daniel, also for this incredible presentation. I just find that fascinating what you guys are doing to really see the detail. We didn't see all the details, but there's so much there. I also thought, Wolf, that was a kind of like almost like the new Burning Wing manifesto you came up with then and I really appreciate the kind of radical, challenging ways of thinking that you're engaging with. Well, I have a question here Daniel is incredibly generous with his time. He devoted his digital futures to teaching other people how to use these AIs and to disseminate information. In a way, the challenge though is this is happening in the office, and many of the things are kind of secret. They can't be resolved. How do we move forward in a way to try and implement this at a kind of larger scale where every single student can be able to engage with these questions? I mean, one thing I will say, Wolf, is that, my students at FIU, when I teach a theory course, right? 95% of them are addressing AI because that's their world. The world, the apps on their phones, that's exactly what they're thinking about. And it's what they're looking forward to. And I think we need to really challenge some of these educational structures so we can get AI in there as much as possible for the future. But how do we democratize this in a way to open it up? Is there a way forward with that?
Are you asking me?
Well, you or Daniel, both. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, Matthias, this is not the inside the building. It's the entrance, meaning this is the from the outside to the inside. Yeah, it's the entrance to the museum. You see the escalator behind the door to the exhibition space. Anyway, Daniel, you should. I always ask Daniel. Daniel, we should bring our plans and our section into this tool as well, so that we can mingle it up. And my dream is, like I said at the beginning, please, I need an opera building with the 2,000 seats auditorium. Please do it. And that blah, 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 blah. And at the same time, I need to have a foam model, the blue foam model. This is the next step for me. And he is working on that, I know, and we will be very fast with that.
Yeah, so here for sure there are two challenges, yeah, because one level is, and I'm going to address both also Matthias and also Neil's comment. So one problem is, yes, you can teach students, let's say, how to use neural networks. That's an easy thing, yeah, like there are plenty of resources out there, computer science tutorials about this. So that's a very easy task in a way. But then the big question is, how do you properly apply it in architecture? And I think we have the same challenge. So right now I'm already working on the 3D aspect of things, but how do you properly apply it? Yeah, because in the end, and also especially in Kopierenblau, I don't think the goal is to automate, like to have a physical model and you look at the physical model and then you have the 3D. Maybe that's one aspect of it, yeah, but it should not be the only one. So then how do you apply in a way that's kind of 3D idea to this? Yeah, I think that's a very challenging thing. I mean, how many, Mr. Briggs, how many times in a way I showed certain images that were like, this is not really working, it doesn't make sense in a way. Yeah, like we have to think better about this. You know, we have to in a way understand this one or interrogate this kind of approach more, because right now is not really relevant for the architecture process. Yeah, so I think this is the biggest challenge. Yeah, the part of teaching just computer science is not that big of a challenge. I think the most crucial thing is how to actually properly apply these kind of tools in architecture. I think that's the big challenge. And in that instance, I don't have a question. I don't have an answer for that. I think I'm fortunate enough in a way to have the mastermind of Mr. Briggs next to me and be able to interrogate together with him certain things. But beside that, I think it's super challenging in a way to figure out a very correct way of, yeah, when I'm saying correct, I don't want to say that there is just one way, but a very, in a way, very intelligent and very good way of implementing this that really brings something new to the table. Yeah.
I just would like to explain how we work in the office. It's not the way people always think that the master is sitting in his room, close the eyes, and is drawing something, and then people are doing it. No, actually, I stopped drawing things on paper. I try to go into the computer because my drawings now are rather a strategy of the upcoming building, form and content as well. I always explain it while I'm drawing to the team. And these are the borderlines. Inside the borderlines, people can do what they want. So this is a very democratic play, so to say. Everyone can put his or her thing into it. If they cross the outer line, we sit together whether this improves the thing or whatever. This is very important because I can read these drawings. Look at the background of Daniel. It's not so different to my background. This is built, this is just an image, they say, but I can read it as a building. Yeah, and I have to learn people to read it as a building. So the perfect way would be that we make a model out of it and then organize the whole thing along to all these issues. We have money, time, structure, and energy efficiency. Yeah, and we could bend it. It's not a given. It's not a fixed thing. We bend it if we need more sun or less sun or whatever, more wind and things like that. So this is a very creative. For me, AI is not a master tool saying it has to be like that, but it's a creative way to improve our architectural knowledge and language. It's a great tool, I have to say. It's complicated, and for students it's a Sandkasten. What's Sandkasten? Matthias, help me out.
Sandbox.
Sandbox, yeah. It's not a sandbox where we are playing, yeah. It's a creative tool. And Daniel is the master of this thing. He created our universe, yeah? It looks like the cancer mist somewhere outside. I like that. I really like that.
Yeah, Daniel is far too modest, and he would never say so himself. But it's great to be able to see his input acknowledged in some way. What I love about your discussion, Wolf, is you have these aphorisms, a bit like Wittgenstein. The world is all there is, and several of them I picked up on. One was the one about AI, that it should be the architect should stay in the front seat and AI should be in the back seat. That's one of the ones. And the other one I like is, it's a very, very Viennese one, is to say, well, you've got to be careful because, you might end up with ersatz cafe. It smells like coffee, tastes like coffee, but it's not coffee. And I think we have to be alert to all these kind of possibilities of the limitations of this tool. But at the same time, I think we've got to be alert to the opportunities that it affords, how it opens up new ways of thinking and new ways of operating as an office. I think that's maybe the important thing. It's not just the tool, but the culture of the office that is changing. And the dynamic that you have with Daniel is actually a very interesting kind of model to how things might go in the future.
Yeah, and I think it's also like these kind of tools, they can help us also, perhaps, Mr. Priest, you have this saying of, in today's tomorrow will be yesterday, in a sense to explain like how far ahead we have to think as architects in a way. I think it's interesting also when we look at this kind of results, we have to keep in mind, that kind of aspect, because many times we look at this kind of AI results and it's like, no, that's too extravagant, too far out there. It's like, but in today's tomorrow will be yesterday. What are you talking about? Like, it's going to take you 5 years to build it, and by that time, that whatever you are proposing is going to be boring. It's not going to be relevant anymore. So how far ahead, can these kind of tools help you to think? 20 years?
Yes.
Okay.
You have to be, you have to design for a building to be built in 20 years. Then you can be sure it will last. True. Now we are ready to build clouds. I like that. I really like that. If we can erase gravity as well, then it's perfect. This is my dream. Daniel,
but
go
that's
back to work and just invent that.
But isn't that the amazing thing about Kupion? Because this is what I was making the comment before in the early beginning of the discussion, is that Kupion Blau has this kind of idea of almost like erasing gravity. And you're creating certain designs and you look at those designs and there's no gravity in them, although there is gravity, structurally speaking, but the space itself is gravityless. Like you have that kind of feeling that you're just floating, or the space is floating in a way. So I think that's the amazing thing in a way of having a great idea, a great architectural idea or design idea, and then try to materialize somehow that against like all the odds and against like the client in a way brief and all those kind of constraints. I think that's something super amazing.
Yeah, and I hate, look at the background, there is no column at all. Because personally, I hate columns. Because, you know, columns are taking pressure. But I don't like pressure, I like dynamics. Yeah? And this is, I like this sentence from the quote from Einstein, yeah? Gravity is not a power or not a force, it's the attitude of a space.
Wolf, the other thing I steal from you is that quote. Actually, the version I have is, and maybe I got this wrong, but you gave a lecture in SciAc once, and the title of the lecture I thought was "Tomorrow, Today Will Be Yesterday."
Yeah.
But anyway, I think it's really important because we're dealing in architecture and architectural culture. We spend a lot of time looking back, and I worked on Alberti as so I know kind of history in some way. But Alberti was a revolutionary. He was a revolutionary, and I think we have to sort of begin to realize that the past and the present and the future are all kind of locked into something important. And as educators, I think it's really important to think that we're dealing with the future, and we are educating to people today who in 20 years' time, I mean, 10 years' time, you'll be with your coconuts, but in 20 years' time, the whole world of architecture is going to be radically turned upside down. And, I think that is the real challenge for educators. I was wondering maybe with a little kind of a story, Wolf, which I think is really kind of relates in some way to what you're not doing in some ways. And that's a story about a professor who used to be incredibly popular. He used to give a lecture, and the lecture hall was packed out with people, with students, absolutely packed out. At the end of his career, he was giving this lecture, and there was 6 people only in the auditorium. And he said, "I do not understand this. I'm giving exactly the same lecture that I gave 30 years ago."
Yeah. In 2 days, tomorrow will be yesterday. I like that. I really like that. And there are a lot of things to say about schools. Schools are very responsible now for the evolution of architecture or revolution of architecture. And the young people should take the chance to influence the next steps. Yeah. Not thinking about career and life-work balance. I heard that it's a pity, yeah. Architecture is not a profession, it's a passion, I would say, like playing guitar, yeah? It's not a profession. This is very important for the young people, and I can see it's a good way you are doing it. Yeah, I'm in discussion with Matthias about city planning with AI. I'm a little bit worried about that because we don't have the computer now to bring all the aspects of city planning into this, to develop a project which is serious enough in order to be built. Yeah, that's a problem. And if Peter was talking about responsibility, it's not so much in a building, but city planning is a very big issue. And I'm very, very interested in city. We are doing now a lot of city plannings because at the end of my career, I would say I did houses and bigger houses, sometimes a little high-rise. It's time to think about cities and put all my experience into it. Yeah, and this is very complicated because nowadays not the architects are doing city planning; it's the politics.
Yeah, I really agree.
And all
it's the politics.
No,
I mean, I have to.
Which politics and economy are so nailed together, yeah. Without money, no politics.
Yeah, I mean, there's.
I have to come back to the States very soon because I lost the overview what's going on in the States. I'm sitting in Vienna. 2 days ago, I've been in Moscow, but this was a great experience, I have to say, because after 1 year, we could go in a bar, because in Moscow, the bars are open. And I tell you, after 2 seconds, it was clear, it was like always. So don't be afraid of the future. This is what I would like to say. Neil, I have to leave. I have to leave. I have to leave. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Wolf. Can I just say one thing? That is to say that in terms of cities, my own thinking is we have to. And this comes from you. This comes from you. So when you say things, don't realize that they have an impact. I went to a lecture by you in Beijing at Tsinghua University many years ago, and you were talking about brains and cities and things. And actually, I'm now writing about the city as a brain, the brain as a city. And I think what is incredibly interesting about your work is that you're interrogating neuroscience. I think it's Peter Singer was the guy, I forget exactly, some Austrian neuroscientist.
Wolfsinger.
But I absolutely
Wolfsinger and German.
Yeah.
The German.
In fact, one of the sessions in the future is going to, in about 3 weeks' time, is going to be on brain cities. I think you were spot on there. It's exactly that. So I just want to kind of wrap this up, because this has been an absolutely fabulous session in terms of kind of opening up questions and revealing things and provoking things and challenging people and so on. And just to kind of respond to some of the kind of comments that have been coming in, let's be aware that there are good and bad sides of AI. One thing that I'm doing, which I mentioned to Wolf before, is I'm writing 2 books. The one is the first one has got a white cover as the angel, right? AI is an amazing thing. And the next one I'm working on is a black book. It's called The Death of the Architecture, the demise of the profession, the death of the architect, the demise of the profession in the age of AI, because we're already struggling, and we have to see the negative side of things. I think Elon Musk is somebody who is a really interesting figure, because he's both working with AI and with Tesla and SpaceX, but also warning us about the dangers of AI. So I think we have to be open to both sides of things, and see the limitations of that. I think that's important too. And next week we're going to be looking at the performance question, about how we look at the tools in the office, and Wan Yu and I mentioned Theodoros will be talking about that. And then the final session is going to be the death of the architect. So I think, but I just want to thank Wolf for his incredible generosity. Daniel tells me every time he hears your lecture 3 times afterwards and finds something in it. And I do the same. I think there's a lot of wisdom there, which is fantastic. I just want to compliment you about that, because you are the one who's keeping architecture alive. And above all, I want to see this building in Shanghai that we voted on, because I want to see that there, because it lifts the place. I had the opportunity to get into that lawyer's office on the roof in Vienna. I argued my way, and I said I was a professor, and I got in to see it, and it went up there, and it was really that just absolutely astonishing space. And I think just that moment, that was really the articulation of the burning wing thing. It was like bringing that into architecture and infusing it with new life in a way, and it really is a dynamic space. And I'm just hoping that this kind of work that you are doing with Daniel, which is so important on the whole question about how you integrate AI and how you bring architecture alive and keep it moving forward, is absolutely vital. So I just want to thank you for your generosity in being with us today and sharing your thoughts. This is absolutely stunning work. I love your enthusiasm and dynamism, and please continue collaborating with Daniel, and we look forward to
Neil, thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and it was kind of Vergnügen, to join you guys. Thank you, Daniel. I love you. And Matthias, don't get an American, just to rethink the Austrian way of thinking. Sometimes it's very healthy. Not too far to Vienna. Vienna is very dangerous, I have to say. I just went by, after a year, after a year of not moving out of Vienna, I passed by seeing the Lowe's house, and I said, this was the house I hated when I was a young architect. I was standing there, and I was thinking, first thought was, it's not so bad. And the second thought was, I have to leave Vienna immediately, otherwise the virus will take over of me, and I will find Loos as a very good architect. He was not so good architect that everyone is thinking.
But you know, Wolf, we never leave Vienna. You know, we never leave Vienna, and Vienna has left its mark on society. Not as Freud. I mean, from my culture, the UK, of course, Freud came across, Wittgenstein came across, and in LA, of course, there are many other Austrians and things. And I think that we never leave it. It's there, embedded in our subconscious in some way.
Well, you know that quote, no? You can get the man out of Vienna, but not Vienna out of the man.
Yeah. I know it's a pity, I have to say. You know, this Vienna was getting rid of the most intellectual level in '39 when they pushed out the Jews of Vienna. This was the culture who influenced everything, and therefore I'm closer to Kiesler than to Rietveld.
Maybe we could finish with a comment about LA rather than about Vienna, since I know that LA is very close to your heart, and I've been to some of the dinners that you, in a very stylish way, Kurt Pilmblau used to host in LA. And there's a comment that Eagles make in their song Hotel California. You can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave. That seems to be the case. Vienna is exactly
that's true. But I learned the difference in LA. I learned the difference between a double decaf espresso and a double espresso in Vienna. And so I created the name Double Decaf Architecture. It smells like coffee. You said it before. Smelled like coffee, tastes like coffee, but had no caffeine. Daniel and me tries to make architecture still caffeinated.
Thank you, Wolf. That's a fantastic point on which to end. I want to thank you for this today, for your contribution, also Daniel. But I want to thank you just kind of long term, because you were the guy who inspired me and a lot of other people who I know in this audience here. And this is going out all over the world. So thank you for your generosity and thank you for inspiration. And I hope before you start going with the coconuts in 10 years' time, you can do some more incredible work with Daniel. I want to leave the final comment to Matthias just to finish off. Matthias, would you like to say something?
Sure. Honestly, this is, of course, as usual, one of those sessions that could go on for much longer. But actually, I think we covered a lot of ground today in terms of, I mean, the usage of AI in the office, the way how Wolf and Daniel are basically using this. It's a really wonderful best practice example to see how this is getting explored. Yeah, and I'm very, very curious to see how this will develop in projects. And the good thing about that Wolf and Pilmblau is doing this is that we're going to probably see those things built earlier than we thought. I thought it's going to take a little bit longer, but I'm very happy that this is getting done. And it's important also because, I mean, there's this small group of people that are working on this idea of architecture, and it's very important to have somebody like Wolf involved that actually exposes these ideas maybe to a larger audience. Yeah, and this is the thing I'm very hopeful about, is to see how this and the speed in which this development is going is also a very astonishing thing. I mean, Daniel, myself, and others, we started working on these things 2017, 2018, which is not that long ago, right? And has developed very quickly through insights that we gather from other disciplines. Yeah, we're borrowing again, usual as architects as we are, we borrow from other disciplines to inform our own ideas and theories and buildings and designs. So I'm very much looking forward to see the further development of this. I also think that Daniel's dedication to, for example, teach students at FIU in terms of how to use these techniques, and as Wolf actually pointed out, and I think it's a very important point, is that this is in the hands of the academia now. We have to push this forward now because it is kind of getting up, picked up in the larger architecture industry, but maybe on rather the darker side of what Neil was trying to describe before. But I think it's a cultural force, and we have to reckon with this cultural force and make it our own in order to be able to have a voice in that culture, because otherwise architects are not going to have a voice in there. And I've made this argument before. If we don't pick it up, somebody else will do it for us. And then it's not that great. Yeah. But we are on the way right now to pick this up and make it our own and shape the face of architecture by doing so. And I'm really looking forward for the next couple of years, which I think we're experiencing currently just the beginning. Yeah. And this is going to be a larger conversation. I'm looking forward to people developing more consistent theories, projects, ideas, discussions, arguments, feuds. They're gonna come. Yeah. And this is going to be exciting times. So thank you, Wolf, for your contribution. Thank you, Daniel, for all your amazing work. Thank you, Neil, for inviting me to be here and talk. Thanks.
And just to say, this is not the end. It's not even the beginning of the end. It's maybe the end of the beginning. We're going to continue next other weeks to come. So please, those who are following today on the live stream, we'll use exactly the same links, the same time next week. And thank you, Wolf. This was absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
Wunderbar.
Daniel, Matthias, and all the questions. And stay cool and carry on.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.